Have you ever met someone and felt a silent truth behind their smile, a truth no one said out loud? What if you could systematically decode those silent signals and know with calm clarity what people are really feeling, thinking, and intending? This audiobook will teach you the readable anatomy of human behavior, how to build reliable baselines, detect meaningful deviations, and translate micro-expressions, voice cues, posture, and language into practical, testable hypotheses. This is not pop psychology or guesswork. It's a disciplined method you can use immediately. Small, repeatable observation protocols, low-cost probes that reveal motive without confrontation, and ethical rules that keep your reading defensive and respectful. Chapter 1. The Foundations: How to Start Reading. People accurately. Reading people starts with method, not intuition. The first foundation is observational discipline. Before you interpret, you must reliably see. Practice a quiet watch protocol. Observe a person for 3 minutes in a low-stakes context without engaging and collect 5 objective data points: speech tempo, dominant gestures, eye contact rhythm, proxemic behavior, distance from others, and baseline facial expression. Record mentally 2 idiosyncratic markers you can use later as comparative anchors. The second foundation is baseline creation. People leak truth when they deviate from baseline. Establish what normal looks like for this person across situations. Then treat departures as signals, not proofs. Third, adopt a probabilistic mindset. Never convert a single cue into certainty. Use language like likely, possible, and needs testing. Fourth, triangulate across channels. Treat face, voice, and body as independent sensors. A fear micro-expression paired with a spike in pitch and a backward step is more diagnostic than any single cue. Fifth, use low-cost probes to convert inference into data. If you suspect discomfort on a topic, ask a neutral, specific question. What happened when that meeting finished? And observe the next 30 seconds of response for corroborating micro-behaviors. Sixth, keep meticulous neutral notes, context, time, the exact words used, and objective nonverbal markers. This avoids memory drift and motivated interpretation later. Seventh, practice ethical rules. Your competence gives responsibility. Only use reading skills to protect, clarify, or support, never to manipulate or coerce. Finally, build a short rehearsal routine before conversations. Set an intention, note 3 baseline markers to watch, and prepare 1 neutral probe. Over weeks, this disciplined scaffolding converts vague impressions into reliable, testable hypotheses and makes reading people a task of evidence rather than guesswork. Chapter 2. Building Baselines. The rule that makes everything else. Work baselines are the difference between noise and signal. To construct a baseline, observe targets in relaxed, neutral settings and record repeated patterns, habitual gestures, average speech rate, typical smile quality, and preferred interpersonal distance. Use at least 3 separate baseline windows across days to account for mood variance. When you begin an interaction, mentally calibrate to those baselines. Does the current smile include crow's feet, or is it brief and lip only? Is the speaking pace 20% faster than usual? Deviations matter more when they are consistent across multiple channels and when they align with specific content triggers. Implement a simple deviation scale, slight, moderate, major, and write rules for response. Slight deviation equals watch and collect data. Moderate equals ask a clarifying low-cost question. Major equals implement a containment or escalation protocol if safety could be at risk. Build a baseline checklist for groups too. Teams have cultural baselines, norms about interruptions, humor, and eye contact. When a team member departs from the cultural baseline, it may flag stress, burnout, or conflict. Use baseline building as an explicit ritual in onboarding. Note each person's markers, share non-judgmental observations where appropriate, and update baselines periodically. The discipline of baselines prevents overinterpretation and dramatically increases accuracy because humans are predictable relative to their own patterns more than to generalized norms. Chapter 3. Face signals. Micro-expressions and their contexts. Faces are a fast, information-rich channel, but they mislead without context. Micro-expressions are sub-second flashes that reveal underlying emotion before conscious masking occurs. Fear, contempt, disgust, surprise, happiness, sadness, and anger. Train using slow replay video practice until you can spot sub-500 millisecond shifts. But always pair micro-expressions with trigger mapping. Ask what exactly preceded the flash. A contempt flash during praise is diagnostic of hidden disdain. The same flash during a joke may be transient. Also read, facial timing, onset latency and recovery speed matter. Delayed recovery often signals suppression. Chapter 4. The body speaks posture, proxemics and movement patterns. The body organizes emotion into posture and movement. Open postures, uncrossed arms, uncollapsed chest, forward lean, signal engagement, closed postures, arm crossing, torso away, protective hand placement, signal withdrawal or self-soothing. Proxemics, distance choices, communicate comfort and hierarchy. Closer distances usually indicate affiliation or dominance, but culture mediates norms. Movement patterns, repeated foot pivots, self-touching, or asymmetric gestures, often index discomfort or cognitive load. Note locomotion changes. Someone who typically moves calmly but suddenly speeds up or freezes has experienced a strong internal shift. Chapter 5. Voice as a window, pitch, rate, and prosodic. Patterns. Voice leaks cognitive and emotional state continuously. Pitch increases often signal arousal or stress, monotone flattens during dissociation or depletion. Speech rate accelerates under pressure and slows under sadness or cognitive load. Prosodic patterns, pauses, fillers, pitch contour, carry pragmatic meaning. A rising terminal pitch can be a request for confirmation, while a clipped, low register can assert dominance. Train by listening with attention to long sentences rather than isolated words because systemic shifts emerge over phrases. Use the 3-sentence rule. Note vocal features across 3 consecutive sentences to avoid misreading one-off artifacts. Pair vocal readings with content checks. If pitch spikes on a factual claim, probe with a neutral verification question. Can you tell me the exact number? To see whether tension reduces with specificity. For remote work, remember audio quality affects perception. Control for signal noise by testing equipment and repeating key checks. Finally, use voice interventions deliberately to regulate interaction. Slow your own speech, lower pitch slightly, and insert calm pauses to stabilize a stressed speaker. People unconsciously entrain to vocal tempo and can be soothed by it. Voice is a continuous telemetry feed. Read it patiently, corroborate it, and use it to design gentle probes that reveal truth without escalation. Chapter 6. Eye behavior, gaze, blink, and pupil. Dynamics. Eyes offer close-range signals but demand careful calibration. Gaze aversion can indicate cognitive retrieval rather than deception. People often look away when reconstructing memory. Sustained eye contact beyond a person's baseline can be perceived as dominance or threat. Blink rate increases with cognitive load and stress. A short burst of rapid blinking during a specific question often signals discomfort. Pupil dilation is high signal, but requires controlled lighting and often specialized equipment. When visible, dilation indicates arousal, but not valence. It signals intensity, not whether the emotion is positive or negative. Use gaze clusters in sequence: initial contact, maintenance patterns, and disengagement cues. If you notice sudden changes, prolonged avoidance, repeated side glances toward an exit, consider context. Are environmental stressors present? Combine eye data with micro-expressions and voice for stronger inference. In practice, when eye signals suggest overload, slow the interaction, reduce cognitive demand, give time, and ask one simple question at a time. Eyes are subtle but precise when interpreted relative to baseline and channel congruent shifts. Chapter 7. Language patterns, words, framing, and linguistic markers. Language reveals cognitive framing and intent. Look for distancing language, that person, one of the people, which often signals reduced ownership or accountability. Hedging, maybe, sort of. Signals uncertainty. Absolutist terms, always, never, suggest ideological commitment or rhetorical simplification. Pay attention to presuppositions embedded in phrasing, statements that assume facts not in evidence, and use gentle reframing questions to expose them. You said X happened. What evidence supports that assumption? Narrative structure matters too. Fabricated stories often lack sensory, temporal, and consequential detail. Truth-tellers provide consistent chronology and incidental specifics. Use incremental elicitation techniques. Ask for the sequence of events, sensory impressions, and exact phrases used. These force cognitive reconstruction and reveal inconsistencies if present. Linguistic pacing also matters. Rapid-fire lists may be persuasion tactics. Long, meandering explanations may signal avoidance. Keep a short linguistic checklist: ownership words, hedges, presuppositions, temporal specificity, and comparative language. Language is the bridge between internal state and external action. Read it finely and use it to convert impressions into testable questions. Chapter 8. Context and Culture. Why environment changes. Meaning signals live in context. Reading people without situational and cultural framing produces false positives. Cultural norms determine eye contact, touch, and expressive range. What is normal in one culture is offensive in another. Situational context, public versus private, hierarchical versus flat settings, time pressure versus low stakes, modulates meaning. A closed posture in a formal audit might mean protocol adherence rather than defensiveness. Environmental cues shape baseline too. Crowded, noisy rooms increase cognitive load and multiply self-soothing behaviors. Always annotate your observations with context tags: location, audience composition, cultural notes, and recent perturbations, sleep loss, illness, deadline pressure. Use context-aware probes. In cross-cultural interactions, ask general, non-threatening questions and watch for comfort rather than assuming pathology. When in doubt, prioritize restraint and curiosity. I may be misreading because I'm unfamiliar with your cultural norms. Can you tell me how this usually works for you? Contextual humility reduces error and increases relational safety while preserving the power of behavioral reading. Chapter 9. Deception and Defense. How to spot manipulation and protect yourself. Deception detection is probabilistic and best handled defensively. Look for clusters of incongruent signals, verbal denial paired with micro-expressions of fear, syntactic distancing with rapid pitch spikes, or detailed but static narratives that avoid causal mechanisms. But beware false positives. Stress, neurodiversity, and cultural differences can mimic deception. Use low-cost corroboration, ask for verifiable third-party facts, request timelines, and seek documentary evidence. Institute a pause and verify rule for high-stakes claims. Insist on time, written confirmation, and independent checks. For manipulation tactics, watch for progressive commitment sequences, social proof fabrication, and urgency framing. Diffuse by requesting cooling-off periods, written terms, and independent advice. When safety is a concern, prioritize containment, move interactions to public or recorded formats, limit one-on-one exposure, and document interactions objectively. Finally, develop personal defense rituals. Maintain clear boundaries about information you share, verify new requests through trusted channels, and train a trusted colleague to act as a reality check for suspicious offers. Deception is common but manageable when read probabilistically, tested empirically, and responded to with systems that preserve fairness and safety. Chapter 10. Ethics and Practical Rules. Using your skill responsibly. Reading people grants influence and therefore responsibility. Establish clear ethical rules. Never use reading skills to coerce, deceive, or profit at others' expense. Use them to clarify, protect, and support. Always seek consent for invasive probes. If a conversation becomes personal, state your intent and ask permission to continue. Document sensitive inferences and the evidence supporting them, and never act on a single cue. Use low-cost confirmation before escalation and involve neutral third parties for high-impact decisions. Protect privacy, secure notes, limit sharing, and follow a need-to-know principle. When you detect harm or risk, escalate through proper channels, managers, HR, or authorities, rather than confronting publicly. Finally, practice reflective humility. Review your reading regularly, admit mistakes, and apologize if your inferences caused unwarranted distress. Ethical practice preserves trust and makes behavioral literacy a tool for human flourishing rather than manipulation. Chapter 11. Reading, Group Dynamics. Who leads, who follows, and why? Group behavior is not a simple sum of individual behaviors. It is an emergent choreography that reveals status hierarchies, coalition lines, and unspoken norms. To read a group quickly, start with a scanning ritual. Identify the explicit leader who speaks first, sets agenda, and the implicit leader who gets deferred to, whose glance shifts the room. The implicit leader's signals are subtle. Their pause often precedes consensus. Their tiny nods produce cascades of agreement, and others monitor their posture for permission. Next, map coalitions by noting mirroring patterns. Who mirrors whom in gestures, laughter timing, or verbal framing? Mirroring is a social glue and signals affiliation. Repeated mirroring between two members across topics indicates a coalition that can shape decisions. Pay attention to interruption dynamics. Who interrupts whom, and how are interruptions accepted or rebuffed? Accepted interruptions mark dominance. Rebuffed ones show resistance. Also watch the distribution of cognitive labor, who asks clarifying questions, who summarizes, and who assigns tasks. Those roles indicate functional leadership, even if not formally designated. Norm enforcement is crucial. Observe what behaviors elicit micro-sanctions, eye rolls, short laughs, corrective phrasing. Chapter 12. Interview and hiring signals, who will fit and who will falter. Hiring is the most consequential short-term behavioral read most managers make. Beyond resumes, candidates leak fit through a constellation of signals. Start with preparation cues, punctuality, the quality of questions they ask about the role, and whether they research the company in ways that align with job needs. Genuine preparation is specific, references to projects, names, or strategy, not generic platitudes. During interviews, look for cognitive flexibility, present a novel, small problem, and watch approach variety. Candidates who iterate quickly, admit uncertainty, and ask clarifying questions often adapt better on the job than those who give polished but rigid answers. Chapter 13. Reading romantic interest. Signals of attraction and authenticity. Romantic signal. Reading blends biology, culture, and individual style. Attraction manifests across channels, proxemics, closing distance, micro-behaviors, open body orientation, vocal warmth, lower pitch and softer tone, gaze patterns, sustained but baseline calibrated eye contact, and behavioral investment, initiating contact, organizing shared time. Early interest often shows as voluntary vulnerability, small self-disclosures and invitations for reciprocity. Authentic attraction includes sustained investment that persists beyond initial novelty, repeated initiation, planning for shared future moments, and integrating you into their social circles. Distinguish tactical flirting from authentic interest by examining consistency and costliness. Fleeting compliments without follow-up are low-cost signals, sacrificing time, resources, or social capital indicates higher commitment. Use the reciprocity ratio. If you are consistently the only initiator, the ratio is low and may predict eventual fade. Balanced initiation predicts mutual interest. Watch for subtle micro-commitments, remembering minor details, checking in after you're sick, introducing you to important people. These scale into relational foundation. Beware of manipulative patterns, grooming sequences that rapidly escalate intimacy combined with isolation tactics, discouraging external contacts, signal control risks. If safety concerns arise, prioritize boundaries and maintain external supports. Cultural norms shape flirting scripts, calibrate baselines to context, and ask clarifying questions if ambiguous. For online contexts, read consistency across platforms. Congruent behavior offline and online strengthens inference. Ultimately, romantic reading should be used to foster consent and clarity. Ask when signals are mixed, express preferences directly, and design explicit mutual check-ins in early phases. Accurate reading increases connection. Ethical use protects autonomy and reduces harm. Chapter 14. Crisis and high stress. Reading, rapid assessment, when stakes are high. High-stress environments compress signals and amplify noise. Effective reading in crises demands speed, triage rules, and containment instincts. Begin with triage, immediate safety, threat to life, immediate operational capacity, can tasks continue, and emotional containment, who needs support to function. Use 3 rapid markers: coherence of speech, fragmentation indicates cognitive overload or shock, motor control, tremor, freezing, or frantic, pacing, and affect congruence. Does emotion match content? If coherence collapses, shift to low cognitive load communication, simple directives, yes, no questions, and immediate concrete offers. Sit down, here. Can you breathe with me for 30 seconds? For teams under duress, map role continuity, who can temporarily cover key functions and protect those people from emotional labor by redistributing tasks. Containment strategies include physical safety adjustments, recorded briefings to avoid rumor spirals, and a single calm point person to centralize communication. Rapid probes should be binary and factual, confirm names, locations, and immediate needs, because open-ended questions overload survivors. Document observations with timestamps and preserve communications for later debrief. Objective records accelerate later investigation and support allocation. Beware confirmation bias. Don't conflate visible agitation with culpability. Stress reactions may mimic guilt. Use cooling periods, temporary pauses before attributing motive, and prioritize support. Train teams with scenario drills that rehearse rapid reading protocols and communication scripts. Practiced responders make better, less error-prone reads. In crises, accuracy is less about deep inference and more about stabilizing systems and people. Your role is to reduce harm, preserve evidence, and restore operational clarity so that careful analysis can follow. Chapter 15. Longitudinal Reading. Tracking. Change over time and detecting trajectories. Single snapshots are limited. Longitudinal reading reveals patterns, trends, and trajectories that predict future behavior. Build a disciplined observation log, date, context, objective markers, and short hypothesis about change direction. Look for inflection points, sudden shifts in baseline that persist across contexts. These often indicate life events, role stress, or deliberate role changes. Trajectories matter. Gradual erosion of social engagement may predict burnout or disengagement. Cyclical peaks and troughs could reflect seasonal mood patterns or project cycles. Use simple quantitative proxies where possible. Frequency of voluntary contributions, response latency averages, or task completion rates, so you can chart objective trends alongside qualitative notes. When detecting negative trajectories, intervene early with supportive probes and structural adjustments. Workload recalibration, mentorship pairing, or referral to resources. For positive trajectories, reinforce with recognition and increased responsibility. Use pattern matching cautiously. Patterns suggest causes but don't prove them. Always test with low-cost probes and corroborating data. For teams, aggregate individual trajectories into group health metrics, engagement variance, emergent leadership growth, and conflict frequency to guide strategic interventions. Longitudinal reading transforms reactive management into proactive stewardship by converting isolated signals into predictable pathways you can influence with timely, proportionate action. Chapter 16. Developing your reading practice, training, reflection, and ethical growth. Turning observational skill into reliable practice requires structured training, reflective feedback, and explicit ethical commitments. Start with daily micro-practice, a 5-minute quiet watch each morning where you observe a public scene and note 5 objective markers without interpretation. Review later and grade your accuracy when possible. Pair practice with periodic calibration. Compare notes with a trusted peer or mentor and discuss divergences to correct blind spots. Use recorded media for training. Watch interviews or meetings at normal speed annotate baseline markers, and replay to catch micro-signals missed live. This builds perceptual acuity without ethical risk. Implement a reflective ritual. After any consequential read, write a one-paragraph post-mortem. What did you observe? What hypothesis did you form? What actions did you take? And what was the outcome? Over months, this log becomes your empirical curriculum. Invest in multidisciplinary learning, basic behavioral science, cultural competence, trauma-informed care, and legal awareness, so your inferences are informed by robust frameworks. Build institutional ethics into your practice, consent norms for sensitive questioning, secure note storage, and escalation rules for safety concerns. Finally, cultivate humility. Treat readings as probabilistic hypotheses, update openly when wrong, and apologize when your interpretations harmed others. Skill without ethic is danger. Rigorous training anchored in compassion turns readers' people into a tool for connection, safety, and wiser decisions. Chapter 17. Reading people remotely, digital cues, email tone, and video presence. Remote interaction changes the signal set but does not eliminate meaningful cues. It simply moves them to different channels and requires new calibration. The first rule of remote reading is to build a digital baseline. Observe a person's typical email rhythm, response latency, message length, punctuation habits, emoji use, and video habits over several interactions before making strong inferences. Response latency is meaningful only relative to that baseline. Someone who replies within minutes normally, but suddenly takes days has likely shifted capacity or priority. Conversely, fast replies from a usually slow communicator may indicate urgency or heightened engagement. In email and chat, tone resides in lexical choices, hedging words, sentence length, use of names, and the presence of concrete commitments. Short, clipped messages that omit next steps often signal overload or avoidance. Messages that explicitly propose timelines and ask for confirmations indicate proactive ownership. Emojis and punctuation are social signals too. An unexpected exclamation point can be warmth or an attempt to feign enthusiasm. Consistent mismatch between punctuation and content suggests performative effect that merits gentle verification. Chapter 18. Negotiation and Persuasion. Spotting Power. Plays and authentic concessions. Negotiation is high-signal interaction because parties reveal priorities through offers, timing, and concessions. Reading negotiation effectively improves outcomes and protects you from manipulation. Begin by mapping BATNAs, each side's best alternative, to a negotiated agreement, because visible flexibility or rigidity often reflects real alternatives. Early anchors are diagnostic. An extreme initial anchor may be a bargaining move, a sincere position, or a signaling tactic. Observe whether the anchor is defended with evidence or quickly softened when questioned. Concession patterns reveal intent. Authentic negotiators make calibrated concessions that are reciprocated and framed with trade-offs. I can do X if you reciprocate with Y, whereas tactical manipulators use apparent generosity to extract larger, asymmetric gains later. Track concession symmetry and sequencing. Symmetric tit-for-tat exchanges suggest fair bargaining. One-sided escalations indicate pressure tactics or testing for compliance. Language framing matters deeply. Loss framing tends to push people toward defensive decisions, while gain framing opens exploratory trade. Chapter 19. Protecting Boundaries. Privacy, notes, and responsible sharing. Reading people creates sensitive knowledge. Protecting privacy and using notes responsibly are ethical imperatives that also preserve trust and accuracy. First, secure your notes, whether digital or physical. Store observational records in encrypted files or locked journals. Limit access on a need-to-know basis, and use neutral language rather than evaluative shorthand that can bias future readers. Timestamp entries to preserve sequence and avoid reconstructive memory errors. When sharing insights with colleagues, summarize observations with context, evidence, and confidence levels instead of definitive labels. Describe behaviors factually, note your baseline, and present possible interpretations with recommended next steps. This reduces rumor and prevents premature escalation. Consent matters if you plan to use sensitive observational material in evaluations, coaching, or performance conversations. Inform the person and, when possible, invite their perspective before formal action. Transparency builds trust and creates space for correction of misunderstandings. For teams, establish data governance rules about behavioral notes, define retention periods, access logs, and oversight. Designate a trusted steward who reviews sensitive logs for fairness and privacy compliance. Legally, be aware of jurisdictional privacy laws and workplace regulations. Recording conversations may require consent. Sharing personnel notes could implicate confidentiality obligations. When reporting safety concerns, follow formal channels and present documented evidence, not anecdotes. This protects both the reporter and the reported individual. Avoid weaponizing reading skills. Never use observations to embarrass, manipulate, or coerce. If your reading revealed personal vulnerability, prioritize support over exposure. Offer resources, a listening ear, and an option for professional help. When in doubt, err on the side of minimal disclosure and procedural escalation. Finally, cultivate reflexive ethics. Periodically audit your use of notes, seek peer review of high-stakes inferences, and be ready to delete or redact records if they were based on errors. Responsible boundary protection preserves dignity, enhances credibility, and makes reading people a sustainable practice rather than a privacy hazard. Chapter 20, Mastery and Teaching. Turning skill into service and coaching. Others. Mastery of people reading is both craft and service. The highest practitioners use their skill to increase safety, clarity, and mutual understanding, and to teach others how to read and be read ethically. Mastery begins with disciplined practice, daily quiet watches, calibrated logs, recorded replays, and a feedback loop where you compare predictions to outcomes regularly. Develop a compact toolkit, baseline checklist, 3-tier deviation scale, low-cost probe scripts, and an ethical decision checklist that you run before escalation. Teach through modeling. Demonstrate transparent curiosity in conversations. Narrate your observational method in non-invasive ways, and invite co-observation with consent so learners see the process rather than merely the conclusion. Curriculum for others should emphasize practice over theory. Short drills on micro-expressions, paired observation sessions with immediate debrief, and supervised live readings with mentor feedback. Include modules on cultural competence, trauma-informed approaches, and legal boundaries to ensure learners apply skills safely. Coaching requires humility, emphasize probabilistic language, require documentation, and teach students to seek corroboration before action. For organizations, institutionalize training through short modules, simulated scenarios, and an accessible playbook with sample scripts for probes and escalation procedures. Mastery also includes building systems, create confidential reporting protocols, peer review processes for sensitive inferences, and easy paths to support rather than punishment for those flagged as vulnerable. Finally, define your service ethic. Commit to using reading to protect autonomy and foster connection. Publish simple public guidance, how people can be read and how they can ask to be understood, so the practice becomes mutual rather than covert. Mastery scaled through teaching converts individual skill into communal resilience. When more people can read fairly and be read with consent, workplaces, families, and communities become safer, clearer, and more humane. Conclusion: a responsible practice. Read to understand, not to control. Reading people is a profound capability that increases responsibility. The methods taught across these chapters, baseline building, multimodal, triangulation, low-cost probes, ethical boundaries, and institutional safeguards, converge into a single imperative. Use your ability to protect dignity, reduce harm, and improve communication. Practice daily, document carefully, seek calibration, and teach others with humility. When you read to understand, clarify, and support, you build relationships and systems that are resilient and compassionate. When you read to control, you erode trust and risk harm. Choose the former. Make behavioral literacy a tool for care, not conquest, and you'll find your interpersonal world becoming clearer, safer, and more honest.